Welcome back to What's Next, Living Longer, Better, Smarter. In this episode, attitude and gratitude. This edition is made possible by Vivid Pics.
So I've been in the photo business for 37 years, and I've seen a lot of things come go. But one thing has not changed, and that this wonderful thing we call a photograph captures a moment in time so that we're able to reminisce and relive those memories tomorrow. And it's important for us to do that so we can share them with loved ones and we can share them with future generations. So please don't let your memories fade. They're important.
I'm Fred Fishkin along with Mary Furlong. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Fred. Here we are, almost Thanksgiving, and there's no better time for this topic, attitude and gratitude. It stays in my heart every day.
Right. What attitudes our first guests have. We saw this wonderful write-up in the New York Times by John Leland about 89-year-old Susan Auslander. The headline reads, "Her retirement home said no to solar panels. She got it to buy 1,344. Both Susan and John are here with us. Hi, Susan.
Hi there. How are you, Fred? Good to see you, and Mary and John. Yeah.
Hi, John.
Hello. Great to be here. Thank you.
This is really a great story. So wonderful to meet you both. Susan, the retirement community you live in is called Meadow Ridge in Redding, Connecticut. So take us back and tell us what happened.
Okay. Well, about 5 or 6 years ago, the owner of Meadow Ridge came, a very delightful gentleman named David Rees, came and talked to the board about, what's happening and what his plans are. And I spoke up then and said, how about, since our electric bill is so high, $1 million a year plus, how about going solar? And he said, well, when we built the community about 20 years ago, it wasn't feasible. And I said, well, maybe if you took another look, the technology has improved so much and the costs for solar components has come down so much, it might be worth another look. So they took another look, but it took a little persuading. We formed a committee and we went to various places like Meadow Ridge that had solar and talked to a local town nearby, Newtown, that has they power all 5 of their municipal buildings with solar. So it took a while, but eventually it happens.
And there were some changes in ownership, all kinds of things that you had to navigate through, right?
Well, a different management company, Benchmark, took over. They own 15%, so they can see what the books look like. And they were much more amenable to it. I had called our executive director, Chris Barstein, when he was still at his prior assignment and, welcomed him aboard and said that we were going solar and we would be a flagship for Benchmark's 64 communities. And he said, I like your attitude, but it's talking about attitude. So the rest is history. So it's going to happen about a year from now in the fall. It'll take a while for all the pieces to fall into place, and the construction season will happen mostly in the spring.
Wow. And John, how did you learn about this and make contact with Susan?
Well, I think when Susan says it took a little persuading, she's underestimating how much effort she put into this. And that's one of the things that drove me to this story. Like a lot of reporters, I rely on the kindness of strangers. And so a lovely woman named Barbara Hall, who I only know online through social media, said she knew Susan from a past life together and that Susan was somebody I should look into. And there's a certain kind of story I like that I will call older adults kicking, well, you know what. And this fit beautifully into that idea. And it just excited me to see the effort and the initiative that people were taking at a time in life when a lot of people in our culture think we should be kicking back and as Susan says, sitting on our rockers and clutching our pearls. So talk about attitude and gratitude, which I think are two of the public health issues we should be addressing more often in our culture. They had a lot of it.
I just want to take you to a scene I had in last month. I was with my friends from college. Now it's 50 years ago. We were in college together. And the college went out of business, Holy Names, but we kept the beach house, the Holy Names Beach House. So we were all there. We were looking at our yearbooks. And we looked at these yearbooks from when we started college. And the profile in the yearbooks and in the clippings were that we would go to tea. And if someone got passed a candle and got married, that was a big celebration. Then 2 years into our college years, we started protesting. We started getting very active, and we became involved in community rights and civil rights and opposition against the war. And I think it's part of our DNA to be a change agent even today. So Susan, you spent years in New York City working in PR and with the League of Women Voters. John wrote that you have a photo of your mother with Eleanor Roosevelt. So these are the women that kind of shaped us, right?
Well,
And,
she's got it right there, Mary. Why don't you let's ask her to show
Yeah,
it.
show it to you.
yes,
Let's see if it.
yes, yes. And I think our sponsor would like this too, Fred. Vivid Pics, because it's wonderful photo, right?
And also, we're in Mrs. Roosevelt's column, My Day. I have a
Wow.
couple of columns attached to the back of the picture. My mother ran for the state assembly in New York State Assembly in 1950, which was kind of rare. And so everybody who runs for office in New York had to get Mrs. Roosevelt's blessing. So we went for tea down to Valkill Cottage. And I was 17, and my three younger sisters were, of course, were along. The youngest was 7. And we were under pain of death that we should curtsy. So that's the convent of the Sacred Heart speaking, So we curtsied, and Mrs. R said, "What a charming anachronism." So anyway, I'm remembering that. But, we had a good time. And the other person, my mother's mother, after whom I was named, was in Columbia County, which is up north of Dutchess, near the Mass border. She was president of the WCTU in the county, which was very handy when my grandfather, the judge, ran for county judge. And he was later appointed by FDR to the state Supreme Court.
Well,
So I've been involved with community organizing and things like that.
yes, it sounds like activism's in your DNA as well. Tell us more about your passion on this issue and your message to others.
Well, I'm sort of a community organizer. You mentioned your college reunion group. I found out there were a batch of people who went to Hunter College, where I went. And so we've organized them. We have lunch maybe quarterly. And that's kind of fun. We have somebody from the elementary school, someone from the high school, Hunter High School, and one MFA person. She went to Wellesley, but we forgive her that. And one faculty member from the School of Social Work. She got a PhD from Penn. So, that's kind of a fun group of people to get together with. I've also organized a an AA group here, with the idea that eventually I may have to hang up the keys to my Prius. That was selfish, that we would have it under a roof here. And we've morphed into 2 meetings a week. And we have people from the outside as well as people here from Meadow Ridge.
Well, one of my college presidents, who lives now in assisted living, but she joins our group when we get together. I'd say about every 6 weeks. And she has current events in her assisted living, but it's quite a group, former Berkeley professors who were there then. So let's talk about the economic benefits of going solar. So that's a good decision, right?
It is a good decision. It was a $3 million project, or will be. And it's going to save us $7.2 million over the life of the project. But if you talk in environmental terms, it's like taking, what is it? 607 metric tons of carbon out of the air. It's like taking 1,000 gasoline-powered cars off the road, or planting, I don't know, 500 plus trees. So it has, but I figured the way to sell it was through the economics rather than the environmental advantages.
Of course, and since we're talking gratitude here, Susan, have they said thank you yet?
Well, yes and no. I think there was some thought that maybe one shouldn't, management should run the show rather than the inmates, shall we say. But anyway, we'll get around that. Chris is a great guy.
John, you have such a wonderful way of weaving words together, and you've had quite a focus on older adults. I enjoyed your latest book, Happiness is a Choice You Make, Lessons from a Year Among the Oldest Old. Tell us about that amazing chapter in your life and the book that came out of it.
Well, amazing chapter in my life is correct. I'm a reporter at the New York Times, and in 2015, I set out to write a year-long series about people over the age of 85. And it was a very, very different way of writing about older adults than what we usually do. Usually we'll take an issue like social isolation or falls or memory loss, and then find 5 or 6 people that fit it and do a story around, squeeze them into a story that's kind of a preconceived line of thought. This was just to follow people and let the stories come out of their lives. It's a series that ended up lasting 7 years and 21 articles by my count. I don't know of anything like it at the New York Times or really anywhere else in journalism. And when I finished the first year, I realized 2 things. I realized that now that I wasn't covering the people to the same extent, I really missed them. And I also realized that I learned a lot from them about living, sort of lessons for living at any age. And that's what made me want to write a book based on that first year of reporting. And, I learned really complicated things from these very, very brilliant, very ordinary teachers. They weren't, the people who have been in the newspaper headlines for years and years, other than one of them, the filmmaker Jonas Mekas. The others all came out of ordinary walks of life. They were Black, white, Asian, gay and straight, upper middle class, or subsisting solely on Social Security. And they all had these amazing, amazing lives, and they had at least 85 years of them. So it was just terrific to just sit and let them be the experts in living and not be the brilliant New York Times reporter or the brilliant book author, but just the student who was feasting on the terrific banquet that they were feeding me.
You didn't sugarcoat the trials, physical challenges, et cetera, that the people were going through. No attempt at doing that. But in spite of all of that, what came through was a lot of positivity and, as you put it, happiness.
There's a lot of resilience. When I call the book Happiness is a Choice You Make, I don't mean we can just pick it off the shelf and choose like the way we choose Crest or Colgate. What I meant was that happiness, if we're going to have it, really at any age in our lives, it has to come out of the way, it has to be something that we carry with us. We can't expect circumstances to bring us happiness, because if we do, we might be waiting a long time. But it's understanding that we have certain control, or at least influence, over a lot of what's going on in our lives. We'll end this call in a little while, and we might spend the next 20 minutes looking at social media, or we might spend the next 20 minutes calling a friend that we haven't talked to in a while. We know that one of those things is kind of going to get us in a bad mood, and one of those is going to get us in a really good mood. And it's a choice we have to make. There's a lot of things we don't have a choice about, especially concerning our health, but we do have a choice in sort of the way we approach our health and the way we approach our free time and the abilities that we do have.
You know, Fred, we heard the same thing with Lydia when she talked about when she cooks. She takes a meal to her neighbors. And I think your point about a phone call is so important, especially during the holiday season, right? For everybody that had memories of years past, rather than navigating a holiday without a partner or with family far away. So I love the sensitivity of what you're saying. When I was founder of SeniorNet, I miss the older adults that I used to interact with when I was so young. So in this era of loneliness and isolation, we saw Dr. Ruth, who has a new job, which I think is really great, that she's loneliness ambassador for the state of New York. Any thoughts from either of you about that?
I think it's a good gig for her. I think, loneliness is an option in some ways. And I know sometimes at our meetings of places like Meadow Ridge, people say, what about the people who rarely come out of their apartments? So I said, well, we could start a hermit's club. And, that somehow doesn't go over that well. But, we have so many organizations here for people. Some of our best bridge players are 105. I mean,
Yes.
Meadow Ridge takes such good care of us that I'm one of the kids in my late 80s. So over to you, John.
I would say that almost all the people that I focused on experienced loneliness in some ways. Jonas Mekas, who was still making movies, would be the exception. My mother, who was still alive then, also was quite lonely. And I think one thing that was interesting was that the level of loneliness didn't have to do with the number of social contacts they have. The people that I saw who were the loneliest were people who were lonely for the life they had before they'd lost certain, mostly physical abilities. Almost everybody had lost a spouse, and they dealt with that in one way or another. But if you were just pining for the tennis game you used to have, or that ability to do this, I think that's like a strong precondition for loneliness. And if you embrace the life you have now with all that it has in it, I've seen less loneliness out there.
This feels like the dinner party I wanted to have. This morning it feels like a breakfast club that you'd want to get to know both of you more. I remember at the White House Conference on Aging, one of the lines that got a standing ovation was that older people need a vision of the future, not just a memory of the past. And that vision of the future may not be with you on a bicycle out doing some of the things that you used to do, but you can still contribute. You still can advocate. You can still care. And now it's a great theme of this morning's podcast, I think. So what a great example you are, Susan. Go for it and become that advocate for climate change and organize those.
I get from John's story, Susan, that you're not done. You're still pushing elsewhere for more solar energy.
I found out we can use Zoom. I've persuaded our state senator and state rep to introduce legislation allowing us to have 50%, say, of our power coming from alternative sources instead of just 20%, which we have now. We're bumping up against that cap. So we're going to, starting after the first of the year, our legislature comes into session. That's sort of where some of the League of Women Voters experience helps, because testifying for town boards and county boards, things like that.
Well, one of the things we did with our Holy Names Friends is we put a calendar for the new year. We had cultural events, we had service events, and I like to think about the 2024 calendar. And what a great example you are, Susan. Really, all of the people at leading age and in senior housing should hear this story, because that could become a bit of a movement if solar went to all of the senior housing. So just you go, girl. You just keep doing what you're doing. It's great to have a spiritual soulmate in that effort. And John, I loved the prose and the writing, and I want to circle back with you. Maybe there's a way you can help me with my own new book. So we want to revise our story after 18 years.
Oh gosh, I like to learn from people and I can learn a lot from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mary, sooner or later, we are all called upon to become caregivers. And sooner or later, we're on the receiving end of caregiving as well.
And whether we're talking about family members or friends or the many employed in the field, we owe so much gratitude to the people who care and care for us, our caregivers. And to take a look at what's happening with caregiving needs today is our friend and real thought leader, Lori Orlov. And Lori, you have a very important new report.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Yes, well, I didn't know it was going to be very important, but I started it about 3 or 4 months ago and decided that the problem I was looking to research and find out about was the shortage of workers. And so I found 26 senior executives to talk to about the issue across multiple industries, and got their thoughts, and also accumulated a series of statistics which actually are in the report and are a bit daunting. One of the things that I thought was quite daunting is the number of nurses, for example, that are leaving the nursing profession, and the fact that doctors are burning out and have been for a while. This isn't just COVID. They've been burning out for a long time and wish they could do something else. And I don't know how many times you've probably encountered a company that is started in the healthcare space that was founded by a doctor.
Right. I think we've seen many of this. Let's talk a little bit about the demographics in the report, because we look at chronic conditions and you talk about people in their 80s. And now the boomers at the top end are going to be 78 next year. So I think this decade of 78 to 88 is when a lot of chronic conditions start to show, right? And
right.
So,
I think it's 85% of people age 65 plus have at least one chronic condition. But when you get to the 85 plus, a third of them have Alzheimer's, and may have loss of vision, macular degeneration and other vision loss, and they may have a disabling hearing loss, which is very isolating. And they may have mobility issues, which are difficulty in walking for one reason or the other. And 1/5 of people, the 65 plus, no longer drive. And so all of that together creates a greater dependency on care workers. And the care workers are the population that is actually challenged and, in fact, some cases shrinking. I just told you about the nurses.
And of course, family members are picking a lot up, right?
And themselves burning out and creating health issues for themselves. Yes. So if you look at what's going on today in terms of turnover among nursing assistants, in the senior living space, it can be as high as 77%, or in the home care space, high as 77%, 55% turnover in nursing homes. And the job growth in home care is actually one of the biggest job growth areas of all job categories, expected to grow 22% over the next few years. So on the one hand, you have an aging population. The oldest boomer is going to cross 78. And on the other hand, you have quite a bit of pressure in the care fields to pay more money and compete with organizations like Walmart and other retailers that maybe have the same pay and not as difficult a job. So if you count chronic illness, disability, and cognitive decline, and you also have to take into account the fact that apparently we don't want to go into a hospital anymore. Mm-hmm. We want to be cared for at home. Mm-hmm. And if our family members can do it, if they can take time off from their job, or they don't have a job, then they can be the caregiver. But if that's not the case, we want to be cared for in our homes, whether it's home care, private duty home care, or home health care. So all of that is an issue. And then when you get into the more interesting statistic, I thought, which is life expectancy. So we talk a lot about life expectancy. It's in the media a lot. It's been said that it shrank during COVID, but that was life expectancy at birth. Life expectancy at 65 is 20 more years on average for men and women. And when you make it to 75, women are likely to live another 13 years and men another 11. So now you've got a population at the upper end that may, in fact, have disabilities, vision issues, mobility problems, and in fact, or dementia, and they may, in fact, need care, and the worker population isn't going to be there.
What we're seeing today that should be of concern to young and old, because it's young children, young people are also caring for elderly relatives, right?
That's right.
This is not just people in their 70s worried about this. This is crossing the whole country, right?
Yes.
In some states now, I've seen ads that seem to indicate that family members, grandchildren or children can be paid
Yes.
providing caregiving. Is that a trend that's spreading?
Yeah, that started, I think, a company started with that in New England, is getting paid for family caregivers. And it seems like a great idea, unless you start to consider the wages in the job market today for other types of work. And so it's not a perfect plan by any means, because if you have a job that can pay substantially more than that, and you have someone else you need to care for, besides the older person, it becomes quite a challenge. And even Walmart has raised its wages, and wages are going up in multiple job categories today. So it was a good idea when the idea was initiated. I wonder how many family members would choose that, and maybe they would choose it because it was their only choice to care for an aging relative. But it's not ideal.
Absolutely. So you're going to be joining us, we're thrilled, at the summit next month at the National Press Club on December 12th and 13th to share the information you've gathered and lead a panel on AI and the future of care work. What should everyone know about the types of AI innovations? And can this help the caregiving crisis?
Yes, it can. In fact, it already is. It's already, so AI consists of machine learning that is given a large data set, deriving meaning from that data set and using the information that you are able to derive to predict possible changes in people or situations. So it's already being used now to read x-rays. AI is being used to read x-rays and has eliminated a lot of the drudgery aspects of being a radiologist. AI is already accommodating doctor's notes. So when the doctor says, this is what I prescribe and this is what is happening, the technology is there today to be a scribe. We already have a situation with monitoring, AI-enabled monitoring that is smart about you in comparison to another person. And one of the great examples of this is, for example, if you're trying to exit from a bed in a hospital or a nursing home and go to the bathroom, if you had a hip replacement, AI would know that and alert somebody to say, stop, don't do that, halt. But if you had a broken arm, you may be able to get up and go to the bathrooms, differentiating between the characteristics of you and another person. We also have a concept called virtual sitter. And I think just like chatbots, which I'll get to in a moment, but virtual sitters are replacing actual sitters. So people used to hire sitters to sit with their family members in hospitals in order to make sure they stayed safe and didn't go to the bathroom without help and so forth. We now have virtual sitters, that is camera-enabled intelligence that can actually see what you're about to do and potentially alert somebody if what you're about to do is not appropriate. So that's the idea of a virtual sitter. And it is being adopted. It's another one of those labor-saving ideas using AI that is going to reduce the pressure on the workforce and on healthcare organizations in terms of hiring the workforce. So that's the key thing about technology that is smart about you versus somebody else. That's a key characteristic of AI. The other characteristics of AI and the technology that's emerged or is in the process of emerging is detecting pattern changes in your voice, in your motion, in your movement around a room, being able to detect, in fact, if you fell without wearing a device on your body. And being one company I found in writing this report decided to get involved with something called proactive care. That is using a combination of data sets to identify care needs before they actually occur. And so I thought that was a very clever idea, and I actually quoted him in the report. We also have AI that's capable of differentiating between high risk and low risk people in healthcare situations and advising on treating the higher risk people first, the triaging of high risk. This is very important as we enter a world where there's a shortage of doctors, a shortage of nurses, closing of rural hospitals is happening all over the rural areas in the US. And the final couple of things I would say about AI is AI can handle unstructured data, which could be your handwriting in text, or it could be just narrative that you provided as part of your life story, or it could be a narrative you provided as a part of your medical history. But the point is, most data is unstructured. And AI can handle that. It can look at conversations and derive meaning. And the last point I would make about AI, which is referenced in the report, is the idea of chatbots. So we've entered a new era where most websites you go to now will have a little box at the corner, including the one I'm looking at, which must be the chatbot for Zoom. Most websites I go to today have a little thing in the bottom corner of the site that if you tap on it, it will start chatting with you about a topic, or it will pipe up in some cases and offer a thought that you can respond to without your initiating it. This is the beginning of a big change in how we interact with organizations which don't have enough people to put at the front desks or on the phone. But more to the point, when it becomes personalized chatbots. In the case of Zoom, that's not appropriate, but in some other sites where it already knows who I am, the chatbot can be informed about my status, my conditions, and my history. So that's the second to last point about AI. And the final one I would say is the world of smart avatars. And that's already appearing in a couple of companies, and we're going to see more of that in the future, where it isn't just a box at the bottom of a screen, but it's the image of a person. And that person can also inherit all the data there is to know about you and have an informed, interactive conversation with you. That is the embodiment of what you might hope for from a ChatGPT or other AI chatbot. It's not just talking, it's talking about what you've already told it to know. So that's, I think, key.
So Lori, you were there at the beginning of the internet, just like I was and Fred was. How big is AI? Is it as big of a phenomenon as the internet was at the time?
Well, I think that, so the internet was a phenomenon as soon as we got a browser, right? Because that meant we could access the internet.
Right.
And then I think the next big technology innovation after the web browser was the introduction of voice, which we now take for granted. We now have the ability to talk. Voice is not a separate phenomenon anymore. It's part of everything. So that was a very big deal. I think AI is the biggest deal we've had since the beginning of the internet, because what it is the ability to take the learning, machine learning, and data, and all of the available information that's on the internet, including the really rare and arcane conversations about devices and technologies and health conditions and everything like that, as well as all the other information. And people are nervous about it, but I think it's the biggest breakthrough we've had so far.
You know, it's interesting because I've seen stories about young people preferring AI girlfriends or boyfriends over the real thing. I'm not sure I get that, but it is a real phenomenon, especially in some countries. Meanwhile, I mean, you've got movements in Washington wanting to regulate AI, a lot of hype around it, a lot of fear sometimes surrounding AI. Tell us what your thoughts are about these headlines versus some of the potential benefits.
Well, it's kind of interesting because they just October 31 or October 30th, I forget which it is, there was an executive order from the White House about regulating AI and making it responsible and unbiased and all the possible things that everybody had already been talking about in an event that was held in Washington between tech experts, including commentary from the guy who owns the company that invented ChatGPT. So, like all government regulation of all technologies that have occurred in the past, This one is sounds vague, and it will be end run by some companies that are creative and figure out how to end run. It's a good idea, but the fact is, look what the government never bothered to regulate. We've gotten to today's date, and there is no regulation of social media sites like Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or TikTok or any of those others. We skipped right over them, which is and Instagram, which are causing so many problems among all ages of people, especially young people. We skipped that, and we said what we're going to do instead is we're going to regulate AI. And why? Because it's new and it's newsworthy. But I would say the government has missed a real opportunity to help us all. And in Europe, they are trying to regulate social media. In the US, we just skipped it. And I think it's because it's very valuable to government organizations to keep it the way it is. Otherwise, they would have addressed it by now.
So, Lori, you've got a couple great panelists with you at the National Press Club, right?
I do, yes. You remind me of Victor Wang is one of them.
Anu Shukla. Veterans
Home Care, to use technology to serve veterans better than we have in the past. And of course, AI is a factor. We really have to stop talking about it like it's this dangerous weed and poison. If we just said technology will be helpful in our healthcare, if we said learning about us would be helpful in our healthcare, and the knowledge that's been collected to date would be helpful in helping us live our lives better, we wouldn't have an anxiety attack about it. And I would say the whole thing about AI and fear has been media fueled, and of course you can find lots of articles that fueled it. So
there's so much misconception because the fears go back to the Terminator, and if there is such a thing as artificial general intelligence, that a machine can think the way we do, and thus far we're a long way from that being a reality, I think.
Yeah.
AI is what exists today is all coded. So it's what's put in, and that's what
you get out. Yeah.
Right.
I like the idea of the intelligence that can help this fast growing boomer population deal with chronic conditions in a better way because people know more about you. But this podcast is a lot about gratitude. And Lori, I remember when you started your company, and you've made such an important contribution. You're truly the top of the game in this space. And so when we think about gratitude, we thank you for spending time with us. We thank you for the quality of the work you do. Really, it's impeccable. And we look forward to seeing you at the Innovation Summit. You bring happiness to those of us in the industry, but you also bring happiness when you play the piano on the weekends inside senior living communities, right?
Yes, I do. I have 4 engagements upcoming. So.
And that's one terrific. Of the songs Lori plays, Fred, is Someone to Watch Over You. And I love that. I love the joy that brings to their faces and the joy you bring to the industry. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Wonderful, Lori. And for those of you working in age tech and on the issues, you don't want to miss the summit, the Washington Innovation Summit, December 12th and 13th at the National Press Club in Washington. You can find more info at washingtoninnovationsummit.com.
Oh, there's a world-class group of speakers and talent, and there's still time to register. We have a few more seats. Use the discount code FOM20, Friend of Mary 20. This was another fun and informative episode, Fred. I hope you and everyone watching or listening has a warm and a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday.
Thank you, Mary, and I wish the same to you. Thank you also to our sponsor, Vivid Pics. Don't let your memories fade. The website is vivid-pix.com. While you're there, click on Solutions and learn about their innovative memory station. We appreciate all of you spending time with us, and you can always find more at maryfurlong.com/podcast.